Hello, and thank you for joining today's webcast. My name is Brooke Chatterton, and I'm a corporate attorney in the Palo Alto, California office of Baker Botts. Last month, my colleague Jennifer Wu, a corporate attorney in our Austin office, presented on company formation matters. Today, I will be providing a short presentation on how to get organized after your new business entity is formed. The period immediately after you form your business can be overwhelming. There are many legal items and formalities that need to be taken care of, many of which don't correlate to the day-to-day operations of your startup. This presentation is not a list of all legal items that need to be completed. Today's session is meant to list out the main items that will help you on the path to getting organized. Additionally, it provides a few pointers of ways to keep organized so that your corporate documentation is on order when you are ready to reach out to investors and begin the fundraising process. As a note, this presentation assumes that your startup is a corporation. The items listed below, by and large, also applies to other entity types. If your startup is another type of entity, please feel free to reach out if you would like to discuss the differences. We divided this presentation into three general categories. The first is corporate formalities, the second is financial matters, and the third is remaining organized. Let's get started. Beginning with the first category, corporate formalities. This category covers the legal formalities needed just after your new corporation is established. The first item is to adopt bylaws. Bylaws are the rules for the operations of the corporation. They include items such as the policies and procedures for appointing directors, the number of directors, the policies and procedures for holding board and stockholder meetings, etc. It's important to review and understand the bylaws, as the document directs how the board should govern the corporation. Bylaws are adopted by the board and approved by your stockholders. Our next item is the election of officers. The initial board of directors of a company is appointed at the formation of the corporation by the incorporator. Following formation, the company must also appoint its first set of officers. If your company is a Delaware corporation, as many startups are, Delaware law requires that you elect at least a president and secretary, although most of our clients also designate a chief executive officer and a treasurer or a chief financial officer. Officers are elected by the board and can be elected at a board meeting or via written consent of the board. Our next item is indemnification and insurance. As noted above, the company's directors are appointed at the company's formation, and the officers are appointed by the board shortly after formation. As a director or officer of a company, you may be subject to claims or lawsuits stemming from actions undertaken while performing services to a company. Most companies' bylaws or articles of incorporation contain language that discusses how a company will indemnify a director in event of such a claim, and if or when it will advance that director expenses to fight such a claim. While these provisions provide important protection for board members, many of our clients choose to have separate indemnification agreements between the company and the director that further defines how the company will indemnify and/or advance expenses in the event of a claim. The form and contents of the indemnification agreements need to be approved by the board and the stockholders before they can be signed by any of the directors. As another point on this topic, your company can also purchase directors and officers insurance. This is also known as D&O insurance, which is a type of liability insurance covering directors and officers for claims made against them while serving on the board of directors and/or as an officer. D&O insurance is not required. Normally, our clients purchase this insurance after they receive venture financing. Our next item is to put together a minute book. At each board meeting, one individual will be designated as the secretary of the meeting. The secretary takes down the formal notes documenting the meeting and memorializes any formal resolutions of the board adopted at the meeting. These notes are the minutes. These minutes will then be reviewed and approved by the board at the next board meeting, signed by the secretary of the meeting, and compiled into a minute book. Some corporate actions require the approval of your stockholders. These resolutions will also need to be included in the minute book. Finally, our last item in this section is to make any required state filings. Each state has different filing requirements for its businesses. California, for example, requires that some companies registered to do business in California file an annual statement of information within the state of California. If you are conducting operations in multiple states, you would generally need to reach out to make a filing to qualify to do business in each of those states. Please reach out if you have any questions on state-specific filings. Our second category is financial matters. The items below are all financial matters that are also generally approved by the board at its first meeting or via written consent. The first item is to apply for an EIN. An employer identification number, or an EIN, is required if you have employees, operate your business as a corporation or partnership, and in several other circumstances. You can apply for an EIN online through the IRS website if your principal place of business is in the U.S. A separate process needs to be followed if your business is headquartered internationally. The next item is to set a fiscal year. The company's fiscal year is its financial year. It can be any 12-month period that the company uses for accounting purposes, but is most commonly just a simple calendar year ending December 31st. If you have a seasonal business that has highs and lows in sales, you may decide you want to have your business fiscal year be at the end of the quarter after the unusual activity has ended. This makes it easier to show how your business is actually done for the year. For example, retailers who have extreme seasonal variation during Christmas time often set their fiscal year at the end of the first quarter. Our last item in this section is to authorize persons to open and manage a bank account on behalf of a business. You generally need to show your organizational documents filed with the state in order to open a business bank account. Our final topic is remaining organized. This topic is less about discrete action items and is instead meant to give you some things to think about as your startup begins to grow. The first item is to think about how you want to manage your cap table. Normally, just after formation, your cap table is very simple, perhaps even just one or a couple of founders. As you begin raising funds, your cap table becomes increasingly complex. As a result, many of our startup clients use online cap table management providers, such as Carta or ShareWorks, in order to manage their cap table. The great thing about adopting these systems early on is that the onboarding to the platform is simple. It becomes much more difficult to set up these cap table management providers as your company grows. Second, you may want to consider if now is an appropriate time to adopt an equity incentive plan. An equity incentive plan serves as a means to attract, retain, and motivate talent through grants of options, restricted stock awards, or other equity incentives. As a note, the creation of an equity incentive plan requires the approval of both the board of your company and your company's stockholders. Finally, now that you've started accumulating paperwork, whether it be legal documents, purchase orders, employee documentation, or other contracts and documents, it becomes increasingly important to organize and store the documents in a simple, defined way. Many startups set up data rooms that they can grant or remove investor access to, as investors need to review these documents while evaluating whether or not to provide funding to your company. Please reach out to me if you have any questions about today's discussion, and I would be happy to learn more about your business and offer any advice to help. Thank you for listening today, and I look forward to hearing from you.